Following up a huge success is never easy. With video games, they know they can't outdo themselves so quickly, so for a sequel, they usually do something different. Majora's Mask is not Ocarina of Time, Mario Sunshine is not Mario 64, and Metroid Fusion is not Super Metroid, it's the polar opposite. The developers were in a weird but beneficial situation with Fusion. They knew that the fans that wanted the evolution of Super would get that with Prime, which was releasing the same day, so it basically gave them the reins to do whatever the hell they wanted. And that's what I love about Fusion. It knows it can't be Super Metroid, and it's not trying to. Where Super is non-linear, Fusion is linear. Super is easy, Fusion is difficult. Super has basically no story, while Fusion actually has a pretty enjoyable one. But I couldn't have known this when I first played it, because Fusion was my first real Metroid game. Yeah, I'm talking about the 3DS Ambassador program again. And in hindsight, giving away Fusion was probably the wrong move. I think they should have gone with Zero Mission instead. Zero Mission is a bit more standalone than Fusion, and if they wanted to get more people into the series like I actually did with Metroid, Zero Mission is basically the perfect first Metroid game. So if you're looking to get into Metroid, I'd say it's still with Super, Zero Mission, or Prime. Not to say you can't enjoy Fusion as the first Metroid game, I sure as hell did, but there's just something about Fusion completely flipping the series conventions on its head that you can appreciate more if you know what those conventions are to begin with. Me though, I obviously didn't care. When I first played it, I was surprised at how much I was enjoying Fusion. Man, did I suck at the game though. My first playthrough was like 20-ish hours on the bad in-game timer with tons of deaths. Metroid Fusion is hard, especially for a first-timer, but there was just something about it that felt like I should be doing better. So I kept replaying and replaying it. No joke, I have like 80 hours just playing it off my 3DS, so I must have played this game at least 15 times. This time I finished it in like 4 hours with only 3 deaths, one of which was on purpose. Fusion is easily the most fun game in the series for me to replay, even more so when it's portable. If I knew I had nothing else to do for a few hours, I usually just ran through Fusion again. It's a dope game. Some fans aren't too keen on it, but I don't care, they're missing out. Seriously, if the 11 or so games I like more didn't exist, Metroid Fusion is a game that I could comfortably call my favorite. That's how much I love Metroid 4, and I'm gonna spend the next half hour telling you why. You remember that thing I was saying before about Fusion being the polar opposite of Super? We get that right at the beginning of the game. Instead of this slow build-up of finding out what's happening after the first 2 games, Samus passes out, drifts into an asteroid belt, and almost dies. After another mission, SR-388, Samus runs into this weird bacteria-looking thing. This is an X-parasite. It later hit her central nervous system, and she passes out while her ship launches an escape pod. The Federation rescues her and brings her to their HQ, but during that time, it multiplied within her and infected the rest of her power suit. Because her suit is so used to her, large parts of her suit had to be surgically removed, altering her physical appearance. Although she looks completely normal, so I think by physical appearance they just mean the suit, but they never really specify. Anyway, her odds of survival were minuscule, but within the span of maybe a day at most, someone conveniently figured out a cure. That plot armor is really putting in the work this time. They propose using a cell structure from a Metroid to drive out the X within her. Yeah, the baby Metroid is still around saving your ass even in death. In the game's manual, it reveals that the Metroids were made specifically to combat the X-parasites on SO-388, and apparently some scientists figured this out when trying to save Samus. I've never got this plot point. I could see this happening over the course of years, but a day or two? It doesn't really bother me. It's more that the Federation is so incompetent at times, it amazes me they could get this done so quickly. But anyway, it works, and now Samus has Metroid DNA in her system, hence Fusion. But because they had to surgically remove parts of her suit, she's stripped of all of her abilities. Out of all the stupid excuses they've come up with for ability loss in these games, an alien parasitic infection is actually a pretty good one. After a quick recovery, the Federation sent Samus to investigate the BSL research station they sent the infected parts of her suit to. But here's where Fusion starts to deviate from the norm. You're usually completely alone, but Samus has an AI on her ship, always giving her her next objective. But hey, she got a free ship out of it. She kinda needed a new one. I've heard plenty of people say this is out of character for her, but I don't think so. A single X almost killed the person who single-handedly saved the galaxy multiple times over. If the X are the thing that caused that explosion, she knows better than anyone that they need to be dealt with. If that means taking Federation orders, so be it. She's not as confident as she was in Super either. She almost died like twice, and now all she has is a standard pea shooter. She's vulnerable. And you can even feel that in gameplay with how much damage you take in this game. The armor on her power suit's been removed, but because of that, she can grab ledges and has faster jumps in general. I don't personally have one preference over the other in controls. Super is a slower paced game than Fusion is, so the floatier jumps work better for that game. Fusion's faster jumps let you dodge attacks and just generally get around quicker. There isn't much wrong with either playstyle, they just work better for the different kind of games they are. In Fusion, you're always given orders. You almost always have an objective marked on the map, and the general layout is given to you at the start of each area, which gives the game a much different feel. It feels less like the usual adventure through uncharted territory and more like a guided bounty mission. It's more artificial, more serious. Fusion's environments feel more artificial too, like how the SR-388 recreation has ventilation shafts and maintenance rooms, the volcano desert area has a boiler room, the water section is a giant aquarium, there's even a sector that's literally just a giant fridge. And it all connects to a central elevator room, which doubles as a way to cut down on backtracking. If this was on an actual planet like Zebes or something, it would feel really forced and unnatural, but Fusion is using the unnatural setting to his advantage. I can totally buy there'd be a room like this for easy travel between areas, because it was intentionally designed to be that way. The research station setting makes the navigation, save, and recharge rooms at the beginning of each area easier to stomach too. Besides, it makes it more convenient to find out your next objective. At first it's usually just go here to get a new ability, but pretty soon they tell you where you have to go without telling you how to get there. You have to figure that part out yourself. It's still a big old go here marker, but it's done in a much more interesting way. Speaking of abilities though, you get them in a much different fashion this time. Before you get them as pickups just like you would a missile expansion or energy tank, but in Fusion, there's two ways to get new abilities. And you do both right off the bat. Your first major objective is to head to a data room to download missiles. Man, 3D printing's getting crazy. And afterwards, you fight a boss to absorb his X-Core to get the Morph Ball. The abilities themselves aren't anything too special, mostly stuff from Super, but because the Game Boy Advance has less buttons to work with, they had to change up the button maps. L and R uses snap to one diagonal direction, up or down, but L now works for both. And instead of cycling through your weapons with a button, you hold R to swap to missiles. This change is just really good. I can swap between my beam and missiles much more comfortably now. It does mean the Super missiles stack with the regular missiles, but that's not a big deal. Seriously though, missiles are really good. At least until we get the wide beam, and then the plasma beam just outclasses missiles most of the time somehow. But because your beams stack, you have ice missiles instead of the ice beam, just in case you don't want to freeze an enemy for some reason. Because you can't turn abilities on and off individually anymore. Not that it's a big deal, but it's kind of a shame. Also unlike Super, is the lack of sequence breaking. Nope, you have to get each ability in a set order and only a set order. You can try hacking the game, but it's actually hard-coded to give you abilities in the order that was intended. Wall jumping was heavily nerfed too. It's still there to help you get around faster, and you might be able to get a few missile expansions early, but that's all it's good for. Still useful, but you won't be scaling walls or anything. The beginning of the game is kind of boring though. You're just running around the upper deck of the station and regaining your basic ass stuff. But things start to get more interesting when you go down the main elevator for the first time. Yeah, that's why the X are dangerous. This is the SAS, a perfect copy of Samus Aran at peak Super Metroid power, except it has no moral compass and seeks only to survive. So here's the thing with the X. You arrive at the station and it's completely deserted, but within the span of a few hours, they overtake everything. Everything in this place is an X-parasite. Regular enemies, bosses, even those things attached to boss doors. There's so many of these things, they replace the usual health and ammo pickups. The only living thing that isn't an X in this place is Samus, and the animals that somehow ended up here. Yep, stated plain as day, they are not X-parasites. Anyway, these things make Metroids look like house cats. They perfectly mimic their prey, obtaining all their knowledge and memories in the process, have this hive mind mentality, no threats when they see one, reproduce asexually, and they can't be killed except when they're absorbed by a Metroid. Yeah, the only thing capable of killing these dumbass parasites are the very species we spend an entire game trying to destroy. This is what happens when you mess with the ecosystem. They already got Samus in one of these things. All it's gonna take is a rogue ship to come in for them to move around the entire universe and overdo overtake everything. I really love how they emphasize how much of a threat they are. They quickly learn that Samus is their only predator and they go out of their way to kill her. They also figure out that data rooms are how she gets stronger, so they destroy as many as they can, and because of her new Metroid DNA, she's susceptible to the cold like a Metroid would be. So there's a special blue X that absorbs the cold so that it damages her when she absorbs them. After you get the Vore suit, they still come after you thinking it'll damage her, but as soon as they figure out that doesn't work anymore, they run away from you instead of kamikazing themselves. Little stuff like this make the X feel like a living species, but it's just badass, especially for a Game Boy Advance game. They even try using the boiler room's reactor to blow up the whole station. They see Samus as such a big threat that they're willing to kill themselves if it means they survive elsewhere. The X are probably my favorite example of antagonists that don't speak, because actions can speak louder than words. They have no emotion, no logical reasoning, they only exist to satisfy the most basic desire to survive and reproduce, even if that means wiping out everything in the galaxy but themselves. The X are like bacteria, if those bacteria were dittos on the biggest steroids ever. Because imagine if you put all those qualities onto Samus. That is the SAX, a singular being whose sole purpose is hunting you, except it's stronger than you. You played through Super Metroid, probably. You know what Samus can do at peak power. You know how much of a threat she can be if she ever snapped one day, which is why it's brilliant that they turned her into a horror movie monster. There's these short sections of the game where you have to face the SAX. The music goes entirely silent, and all you can hear is its footsteps. And keep in mind that these aren't just scripted cutscenes. There's nothing stopping you from just running up to it and getting yourself killed. It's such a genius idea that's executed so well. All you can do most of the time is wait it out and hope it leaves. Oh, and those moments where you have to run away from it, it's the opposite. You no longer feel tense, you feel panicked. You're literally running for your life. I mean, have you seen how much damage it does to you? The X sets a very different atmosphere from the rest of the series. This is a light horror game. Everything in this space station is hell-bent on killing you by any means necessary. It actually reminds me of the first Half-Life now that I'm thinking about it. You're always in danger, and whenever you start to feel safe, it's almost always suddenly taken away from you. Anything can go wrong at any time, and you start to feel it by the end. They trashed this station. There's tons of doors completely destroyed. Some leaving the path blocked, others leaving the path open. Holes everywhere. The Arctic sector is even completely melted. It's amazing that this place is still functional. The only comfort you really feel is the standard structure. You're railroaded into doing everything in a set order. You go to a navigation room, get your next objective, get an ability or two, and then move on to the next one. You can't even leave the area until you get this done most of the time either. The game's structure is so much more restrictive than other Metroid games, but it gives you this sense of security. You feel safe in a way. While the game starts to feel samey after a while, you have a comfort in knowing what to do next. And that comfort is stripped away when the power goes out. It's the standard elevator ride that you usually turn your brain off for, but then you have to escape the elevator shaft to get to your ship. Now you have to navigate through the back rooms of the facility and have to fight one of the hardest bosses in the game. You can't go anywhere except the path the game lays out for you, because not even the doors and save rooms work without power. You feel cornered, with no way out except to go through this short section and beat this boss. And this is where you can start to realize that linearity isn't a bad thing, it's just a different thing. A game being too linear is a complaint I've heard plenty of times, not just with Metroid Fusion. But realistically speaking, what's wrong with that? What, going down a fixed, intended path is bad? If you hate that a certain game is too linear, it's probably because it's not implemented right. Like, you know how that with Breath of the Wild is open-ended, and you can go anywhere and do things in any order you want, but it's easy once you get used to it, has very little story, and yet is seen as the best game ever? Or how Ocarina of Time is going through areas of mostly linear corridors, but has a pretty good story and is decently challenging at points, yet is also considered the best game ever? Basically, the more open-ended you make a game, the harder it is to make it challenging and give it a story that actually feels cohesive. Because it's so open-ended, you have no idea how strong the player is at any given point. Maybe someone will make a beeline for Naboris, but someone else says after clearing out like 75% of the shrines because Thunderlight Ganon is a pain in the ass. Totally not speaking from experience or anything. While in Ocarina of Time, you know exactly where the player is at when they enter Jabba Jabba's belly, because there's only so much they could have done before that point. It's the same deal with Metroid. Super is easy and has basically no story because it's one of the most open-ended games of its time. But because Fusion was made to be linear, it was also made to take full advantage of the pros that come with that. Which means that the game's harder. You take more damage than in previous games, but enemies have more defined patterns to dodge. In Metroid, you never really had to try to dodge attacks because you had obscene amounts of health as long as you got most of the energy tanks lying around. And because of that, I never felt the need to learn boss patterns. You're a damage sponge. You don't really need to dodge attacks up to a certain point. But in Fusion, the more defined boss patterns and snappier jumps allows me to actually learn enemy patterns so that I don't have to take damage. And the bosses are actually fun to fight too. Arachnus is a really good first boss because it teaches you the fundamentals of fighting bosses in Fusion. You don't have enough health of sponge damage, you have to dodge his basic shockwaves and rolls, and the nearby ledges gives you an easy way to do that. And it's the throwback to the one Metroid 2 boss that wasn't a Metroid, which is pretty cool. Makes sense too, since they have an entire sector based on the planet Metroid 2 takes place on. Zazabi is a fun fight, I think that's how you pronounce it. You have to fire a bunch of missiles up its hole in its body to hit its eye. It just feels good to take down. Two bosses in particular are insanely hard though. God, I hate Ghetto. Or is this thing called Yakuza? I don't know, I think it's both. Alright, imagine fighting the DVD logo, but it also stops to shoot fire at you, and that is the only small window to shoot it with missiles. It's a pain, and in the second phase, you have to hit the same spot where a projectile is coming out of. Ugh, how on earth did I beat this guy so easily this playthrough? And then there's Nightmare lowering the gravity, so you have to use your beam to hit his awkwardly positioned generator thing. And then the gravity's back to normal, but you have to shoot missiles at his face from this ladder while this thing comes at you. If it stops at the right angle, you can get a ton of damage in, but if it stops at the wrong angle, it can be awkward to hit at all. Actually, why the hell is this thing even here? I thought this place was a biological research station. Why do these people have not one, but two bioweapons running around? Bosses have a second phase as well. They're all X-parasites, so you have to take down their core. This is the easy part, but they do give you a new ability afterwards, and it's always fitting. Like how the giant alien armadillo gives you the morph ball, the speed sea serpent dude gives you the speed burst, or how Ghetto uses the space jump in the second phase of his fight. Oh, I love this trope so much. It's so cool to fight a boss and then get one of his abilities. Real quick though, why is the armadillo called Arachnus and the giant spider called Yakuza? That's so weird. Metroid Fusion almost feels like an action game at times, which is by no means a bad thing. Metroid works well as an action game, damn well, and that makes it fun to replay for me. It feels like I can always get better, but in a different way from Super. Before, I could always find out something new, but this time, maybe I can do it faster, take less damage, or maybe I can get less pickups. Okay, I'm not that crazy. I'm a simple man. I see pickup, I pick it up. What kind of heathen just ignores them? Especially now that it doesn't play the full power-up jingle with every pickup you get. Speaking of quality of life though, I love how doors are shown on the map, and you can go into a somersault from a standing jump. It makes activating the space jump less awkward, makes the action feel a little more fluid. But that action feel isn't the only benefit of linearity. Metroid Fusion actually has a story. Not a deep one, sure, but one that I really enjoy.
Spoilers.
Fusion has a lot more dialogue than usual, mainly from Samus's computer, whom she calls Adam, because he reminds her of a CO she used to take orders from. That's one of the cool parts about Fusion. You'll sometimes have Samus monologuing to herself, usually during elevator rides. We don't normally get this much dialogue from her. The only time she's talked before was recapping the story in Super. And at the beginning of the game, she feels vulnerable, not as confident as she used to be. But over time, she starts gaining that confidence back. She averted the boiler explosion, she survived a few SAX encounters, she got the power back on, she even got the space jump and plasma beam back by herself. Hell, the boss following the spider is ironically the easiest boss in the game. You literally just spam missiles and occasionally jump. You know, it's actually kinda cool. They show in gameplay how much more powerful you've gotten and almost instills more confidence in you, the player. I am reading way too deep into a Game Boy game. Anyway, pretty soon after this, you get your ass kicked by Nightmare, you get the gravity suit, and Samus starts ignoring orders. Instead of heading back after defeating Nightmare, she uses her new gravity suit to go through a new part of the Aqua sector and gets the fusion missiles out of it, along with opening up the level 4 security doors. After beating up the security robot, she gets the wave beam to ignore the most obnoxious warning possible.
Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization. Warning, no entry without authorization.
You can add voice clips on Game Boy Advance, we get it. Why must Link to the Past Link sound like Oot Link? And did we really need these sound effects in Super Mario World? But hey, there was a clear reason why this place needed so much authorization. Turns out the Federation is making more Metroid clones. No wonder they had a perfect recreation of SO388. If you go back to Sector 1 after this point, you can even see Metroid shells everywhere. That's an awesome touch. Wait, if you were just gonna clone them anyway, why make Samus kill all of them? Luckily, the SAX comes in and trashes the place. Good riddance. Adam reassures Samus that the Metroids were for peaceful application only. Yeah, and Prime Trilogy HD is real. Please let me be wrong a second time. But with that Metroid research, they can raise a larva to an Omega within a few days, which made it easy for one of the SAX to smell out his only natural predator. Yeah, one. The X produce asexually like bacteria, so there's at least 10 SAX running around now, because things can never be easy. Afterwards, Ridley comes back as an X-parasite. Oh my god, why does that scream have to be so loud? Is that him compensating for how hilariously easy he is in this game? As I was saying, you kick his ass, you get the sewer attack, moving on. Adam tells Samus that we're finally done here and to leave the rest of the Federation, and she goes off on him. Yeah, she actually talks in this game, and it's not weird. I love this. I hate it when protagonists are silent for the sake of being silent. It's always awkward. Samus ain't having any of this. She knows more than anyone how dangerous the X are, and she's not letting them walk away and doom the entire galaxy. I've heard people say that Samus talking is out of character, but this is the most Samus has ever been. I don't get why some people don't like this. Maybe it's why she doesn't talk in Prime 3, because it feels weird in that game. There was a whole room of people having a conversation and she's just not saying anything, when Fusion already proved that she can talk and have it feel natural. But anyway, Samus argues with the militaristic Siri for a little bit about why capturing the deadly alien is a bad idea. Turns out that the Federation has been using this mission as an opportunity to keep Samus' power under control, to which they miserably failed at. They stopped sending support data a while ago, and even went against sending her the plasma beam so she wouldn't try to confront the SAX. Joke's on them, she can't damage it without the wave beam anyway. But she restored most of her abilities on her own, including the diffusion missiles that they accidentally sent, which leads into one of my favorite Easter eggs of all time. In the aquarium port of the awkward sector, you can use a long series of shine sparks to skip getting the diffusion missiles. It's hard, like really hard. I've tried to do it before, but I didn't even attempt it this time. This skip is the hardest skip in the whole series, and if you can do it, consider it a badge of honor. That is something to be proud of. You will not find this on accident. All this just to avoid using a single diffusion missile. Huh. If you can pull it off, they congratulate you. They even tease the Federation's plan. That's awesome. It really shows how well made the game is that they knew about something as obtuse as this. You still need those diffusion missiles though. But yeah, Samus being trapped in a navigation room while being forced to wait for the Federation to arrive. If she doesn't stop them from coming here, they will absorb the knowledge of the people on the ships, and they will spread across the universe because of it. So Samus has to activate the self-destruct sequence and finally get rid of these bastards. In an attempt to reason with the computer, Samus accidentally calls him Adam, and something almost awakens in him. The computer starts helping her, and basically calls Samus an idiot for thinking this plan will work, because all that'll do is remove the X's only obstacle. Herself. The much better option would be to change the station's orbit to include SO-388 in the vaporation field of the blast. So Adam orders Samus to do exactly that. Yeah, Samus' CEO that the computer reminded her of actually is the computer. Turns out that the Galactic Federation occasionally uploads skilled leaders and thinkers into computers as AI. It's really cool, actually. If we ever progress AI to this point, this is something they'd probably do in real life. Like, can you imagine what Albert Einstein or Nikola Tesla could do with today's technology? I think about stuff like this weirdly often. Before Samus can get to the controls, one of the SAX show up, and this time, there's no running. The final boss is yourself. The thing that's been giving you so much shit throughout the whole game is what you have to face right at the end. That's so cool. It's hard, too. I nearly die. Oh my god, what the fuck? Imagine having to fight some messed up alien monster version of yourself. And more importantly, how is this phase easier than the first? You just run back and forth and hit it with your charge beam a few times. Afterwards, you get one last ability. Oh, it left. Oh well, let's just blow this place up already. After heading back to the docks, your ship is gone, and there's a Metroid shell on the ground. So now we have to fight an Omega Metroid on a time limit. And it one-shots you. Peaceful application only. But the SAX comes back to fight his natural enemy, not to save you, before getting his ass kicked. That's a really cool take on the getting saved just in the nick of time trope. This thing doesn't care about you. It just sees killing the Omega Metroid is more important than killing Samus. But in absorbing the SAX, you get the Ice Beam, which Samus's body was supposed to reject. Huh. Just one more lie the Federation came up with. The Ice Beam also restores the classic Varia suit colors, which I never liked. It just looks weird on the Fusion suit. The blue and yellow, or purple and cyan, look way cooler. But I'm a weirdo that actually likes the puke green and silver of the Fusion Varia suit, so what do I know? The Omega Metroid is pretty easy, but you have to be careful because you're not only on a time limit, but each attack does a full tank of damage. Trust me, dying on this part is not fun. But after you get the patterns on these bosses down, they're kind of a joke. Afterwards, the BSL goes boom, the X are presumably donezo, and Samus Aran is now a criminal. Yeah, going against the government doesn't usually put you on the good side, but it had to be done. She couldn't just sit there and wait to doom the universe. And it left the series in a weird position. Fusion is the last game in the timeline, so if they make a new game that takes place afterwards, there's a bunch of different ways they could go. The Federation obviously won't be happy about destroying their latest toy, but maybe someone with enough influence actually does understand, and Samus just gets a slap on the wrist. Or maybe they put out an arrest warrant and the next game is running from the law. Or maybe there's a full investigation and we get an Ace Attorney-esque spin-off for the trial. A man can dream. And this kind of speculation went on for nearly 20 years. When Prime 4 was announced, there was a part of me that was disappointed. I want to know what happens next. But luckily, I don't have to wait much longer since Metroid Dread releases this October. They totally went with the Federation hunting down Samus route, which I'm cool with. It's a bit of a shame it took this long to continue the story though, because the story this here is really good. There's lots of intrigue and paranoia, it almost feels like a horror movie at times. Metroid Fusion's story isn't amazing, sure, but it goes to show how much better a game can be with a good story. This isn't just some random station, I'm actually interested in what's happening here. The X are fascinating, and it makes you want to get rid of them. And seeing Samus speak up and talk makes the later parts of the game feel that much more memorable. Like with Portal 2, it just feels satisfying to have a good story in a game you wouldn't expect one from. So, Metroid Fusion, it's kinda really damn good. Like seriously, have you not been listening to me gush over this for the past half hour? This is the same Metroid gameplay as usual, but it's presented in a very different package. That non-linearity and adventure of Metroid is substituted for challenge, tension, and this constant sense of dread. Everything in this place wants you dead, including a soulless clone of yourself. Metroid's insane with this atmosphere, and Fusion has its own flavor of it. There's so many games that try to be different for the sake of it, but Metroid Fusion manages to not only be different from every other game in the series, but in a way that still feels like Metroid. It's more linear, but the core gameplay loop of getting new abilities to get more abilities is still there. They easily could have lost the soul of Metroid and go in the exact opposite direction of what most fans want, but they still remember the bulk of what made the series so good to begin with, which just makes me respect what the designers of Metroid Fusion were trying to do, because they didn't just succeed in doing that, they triumphed. Metroid is a non-linear power trip through an alien world, but Fusion is a challenging mission through a space station, and that's why it's my favorite Metroid game. Metroid Fusion is the antithesis of Metroid, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Take care, and I'll see you all next mission.